Not everyone can make it tonight. Glad you could be here. We thank you for the visitors that have come. Pray you come and be with us again and you have an opportunity. We're studying 3 Psalms this evening, beginning in Psalm number 99. Turn to Psalm number 99 as we begin this evening. First of all, we want to review last week's Psalms that we studied, Psalm number 97 and 98. So quickly, as we look at Psalm 98, what was the theme of Psalm 98 from our study last time? What did you do? We decided was the theme of Psalm 97. Susie.
God's sovereignty and righteous judgment.
Okay, God's righteous judgment. And we talked, as we have several Psalms, how fundamental these are to God and his character. That says it's the foundation of his throne. His judgments are based upon his justice and his righteousness. Okay? Psalm 98, what was Psalm 98 about? Karen?
Sing to the Lord for his salvation, righteousness, and judgment.
Okay. So again, it's about his judgment and righteousness and his equity. And we should rejoice and sing praises to God. Whether it's talked about everything on earth, should recognize God and honor him. So those are some of the themes we saw in those Psalms, and we'll see similar themes in some of the Psalms this evening. Question or discussion anybody has from last week before we begin? All right, let's go ahead and read Psalm number 99, if you'd like to turn there, please. Psalm number 99. Who'd like to read that for us, please? Bill, Psalm 99, please.
The Lord reigns, let the peoples tremble. He dwells between the cherubim, let the earth be moved. The Lord is great in Zion, and he is high above all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. He is holy. The king's strength also loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his footstool. He is holy. Moses and Aaron were among his priests, and Samuel was among those who called upon his name. They called upon the Lord, and he answered them. He spoke to them in a cloudy pillar. They kept his testimonies and the ordinance he gave. You answered them, O Lord our God. You were with them, God, who forgives. Though you took vintage in their deeds, exalt the Lord our God and worship all his holy hill. For the Lord our God is holy.
Okay. So as we look at our questions, how would you summarize this psalm? What's the theme of Psalm 99 as you studied it, prepare for it? Steve, what was your view of the theme?
His faithfulness to his people and his mercy and judgment.
Okay, once again, you have judgment and his mercy, his character is related to judgment. There were some other things as well. What else? Rick?
For God is great, he's holy, he's just, and he's righteous.
Okay, so again, we're going to see the psalm emphasizing the character of God and how it relates to our service to him, how we ought to worship and serve him and so on, especially talking about his holiness. So each of these psalms, as we've been studying recently, have talked about our responsibility to serve God because of who he is. So as we look at the first few verses then, question number 2, first 5 verses. Why does God deserve to be praised? Look at the first 5 verses. Why should God be praised in those first 5 verses? Karen?
He reigns, is holy, is just, established equity, and is righteous.
Okay. So again, we see these characteristics of God, that he reigns, and the people should respect him. He is great, verse 2, high above all the peoples. He is holy, verse 3. And he loves justice, equity, verse 4, some of the same things we've seen in other Psalms recently. Executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. So we should exalt the Lord. Okay? So a lot of the same themes we've seen in other Psalms. Other comments on the first 5 verses? I noticed in particular, let's see, there was a particular point I wanted to, well, first of all, again, who all should serve God, who all, according to these verses, should honor God and serve him. Who does this apply to? Just the nation of Israel? Who should serve him? Frank?
It says he is high above all peoples or all nations. So all nations should serve him.
All peoples, all nations, and remember those are terms for the Gentiles. Not just a nation, not just a people, but all peoples, all nations. It's the Gentiles as well, because God is the creator of all. And notice in verse 1, it says he dwells between the cherubim, and we've discussed that before. What does it mean when it says he dwells between the cherubim? What is the significance of God dwelling between the cherubim? Terry?
There were cherubim on the top of the Ark of the Covenant, and it was the place God showed himself there.
Okay, so it's referring specifically to the most holy place, the mercy seat on top of the Ark of the Covenant, the two cherubim that were above the Ark of the Covenant, and God was symbolically, that was where he would come to meet with the people to worship them. And so he was the God who dwelt between the cherubim. And so all this is describing the greatness of God and how then we ought to honor God because of his greatness and worship and serve him. Verse 5. What does it mean to worship at his footstool? To worship at his footstool, what is the significance of worshiping at his footstool?
It's a humble location. You're at his feet, you're below him, we're beneath him. He would be above us as if on a throne.
Okay, so it's our humility because we're bowing before him at the place of he rests his feet, but at the same time it's a place of honor. What an honor to be able to be at the foot of God, to be before him and allow him, that he would allow him, you worship him and bow before him. And so it's humility, but it's also an honor to be in that position that we can worship and honor God. Anything else in the first 5 verses? Okay, question number 3 then. The rest of the psalm, he names some particular people who called upon God, and who was that? Specifically in verse 6. Who were some people that called upon God and worshiped him as they should? In verse 6. Bill?
Moses and Aaron and Samuel called upon his name.
Moses, Aaron, and Samuel, and he, among those who called upon his name, they called upon the Lord. And what's the significance of this? What is it? Why is he talking about those particular men? And as it follows through in the rest of the psalm, Frank?
Well, he answered them when they called upon him. He answered them, and he spoke to them, and he gave them the testimonies of his ordinance.
Okay. So these are some examples. Of course, there are many others, as it says, but these are some examples of people who did what the psalm was talking about, who honored God, worshiped God, and went to God for their needs to be met. Okay? So what's the lesson for us? Steve?
Prayer is powerful.
Okay. In particular, what are some things that these men were known to pray about? And that one may be a little bit difficult, not specifically mentioned, but I think there's a theme to this. Those men in particular prayed about what to God? Terry?
They came, Moses and Samuel and Aaron, because he was a priest, presented the needs of the people, their sins, their need for mercy and forgiveness. That's how they approached God on behalf of people.
Okay. That's what I thought, too. That was the theme, the common aspect of Moses, Aaron, and Samuel. Their prayers were not just on their own behalf, but they recognized God as the one who would provide for the needs of the people. And so they not only presented God's word, his ordinance and testimony, verse 7, but God answered them regarding the people. He was the God who forgives. And even though he took vengeance, he was willing to forgive. And so the people should exalt the Lord. You think about Moses and Aaron and Samuel, how many times their service was not for their own benefit, but for the benefit of the people. And how their prayers to God were for the God to forgive the people, or to be patient with the people, to care for the people. And God answered them and showed that he was willing to forgive. Okay, other comments to 6 through 9. Sharon.
Number 7, verse 89 specifically connects God speaking to Moses to the mercy seat. It says, when Moses went into the tent of meeting to speak with the Lord, he heard the voice speaking to him from above the mercy seat that was on the ark of the testimony, from between the 2 cherubim, and it spoke to him. So that kind of connects verses 6 and verse 1.
Okay, all right. Karen, did you have your hand up?
You referenced the last part of verse 7, but calling upon the name of the Lord also means that you're willing to keep his testimonies. It says they kept his testimonies and the ordinances he gave them. So you can't just call upon the Lord in your time of need and then go about your life. Your life needs to be spent in obeying him.
Okay. Other comments on the psalm? Susie.
I just thought that these men were righteous and prayed, knew where their salvation and forgiveness was and mercy, but they themselves were not perfect. They did have sins of their own, and that tells us that God can still hear us when we repent. So these weren't the men that couldn't sin; they did sin.
Okay, I noticed that especially in the last part of verse 8. He says, you answered them, O Lord, you were to them God who forgives, though you took vengeance on their deeds. So when you think about these men and the people, when they prayed to God, yes, God was willing to forgive, but they still suffered for the consequences of the wrongs that they had done. God was willing to forgive the people, but they still suffered the consequences. And so we need to learn that lesson as well. Yes, God is willing to forgive, but there are consequences at times for the things we do that are not right. Frank?
3 times throughout this, the writer says that God is holy, and so he has all authority, and so we have to submit to his authority, and when we don't, as you mentioned, we will suffer the consequences if we don't keep his ordinances.
Yes, and that's why in the heading on the chart I emphasize that God is holy. That is emphasized several times in the psalm, the characteristics of God. Why it's so important for us to trust him, worship him, but also to realize that we must be obedient. We must serve him because a holy God requires us to be holy if we're going to be acceptable. Anything else on Psalm 99? Terry, then we're going to move on.
In verse 8, when you just talked about, they found you to be a forgiving God, but also one who punished their sinful deeds. So often people want to see God as only the forgiving God, the loving God, and they don't want to know anything about the side of God that punishes wrong, and they don't give any credence to that, so they don't live righteously before God. They ignore God's wrath.
And we've talked about that a number of times, haven't we, that the Psalms emphasize the character of God and what that means in our relationship with him. When you understand who God is and what God is like, then you understand so much better what your responsibility is to God. It goes together. You have to know God, who he is, what he's like, then you know what he expects of you and what you should do to serve him. All right, let's go to Psalm 100 then, the next psalm as well. And let's read Psalm 100, one of the shorter ones. Who'd like to read Psalm 100 for us, please? Neil, please.
Make a joyful shout to the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, He is God. It is He who has made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. Enter into His gates with thanksgiving and into His courts with praise. Be thankful to Him and bless His name. For the Lord is good, His mercy is everlasting, and His truth endures to all generations.
Okay? So, what as you conclude to question number 4, what's the theme of this psalm? How do you summarize the theme of Psalm 100? Susie?
It's a universal call to worship the Lord with joy and thanksgiving.
Okay. Steve, what did you have?
Living a life of integrity and righteousness.
Okay. So again, we have the idea, who is God? Why should we live in relationship to that? But the one thing that I picked out especially, that was especially of interest to me, was one that Susie mentioned, that joy and gladness. So whereas Psalm 99 emphasized God's holiness, this psalm, I noticed several times, talks about we should be joyful and glad in our service to God. It's a blessing to be able to serve the true God. So let's look at it more specifically then. Last part of question number 4, verses 1 and 2. What should characterize our praise of God in those first 2 verses? First couple of verses, what should our praise of God especially be like? Frank?
A shout for joy, a joyfulness, and to serve with gladness, and come before His presence with singing.
Okay. There you see the joy, the gladness, and singing. Why? Verse 3. Well, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself now. Other comments to the first 2 verses? All right, so we have the very beginning, joy and gladness. It's not the worship we give to God is, certainly there are times when we are sad. There's hardships and difficulties in serving God, no question about that. But nevertheless, every one of us should rejoice to be able to serve God, the true God, to be able to worship Him. So let's notice then some of the other things it says about it. Question number 5, verse 3. I describe our relationship to God. What is our relationship to God in verse 3 then, Rick?
We are His sheep.
Like His sheep.
Well, we are His people. He made us. We are His sheep, and He is our shepherd.
Okay. So we are the creatures, He's the creator. We are the sheep, He's the shepherd. Okay? What does that teach us? What should we learn from that in our worship to God? And what about that should give us joy and gladness in our service to God? What do we learn from that, Rick?
Well, He is our creator. He made us. We are His. We owe everything we have to Him.
Okay. Okay. Other comments? Susie?
As a shepherd, we're in His fold. We're under His care, His guidance and protection.
Okay. So we've seen this illustration before, haven't we, as well? God is the shepherd. We're the sheep. He cares for us. He protects us. He provides for us all those blessings, Psalm 23 and so on. All those blessings that He provides, that's what gives us joy. That's what gives us gladness. It's not just that He's up there making all these rules to make our lives miserable and that He can punish us if we do wrong. He's a God who loves us and cares for us like a shepherd loving His sheep and caring for them. Okay? Other comments to verse 3? And
I mean, backing up to verses 1 and 2,
Sure.
I think that helps us maybe recognize that if there's not some emotion involved in the joy and gladness that he talks about, when we're serving Him, if we don't feel some emotion, there's probably something missing. If we don't have a feeling, not that we serve Him with feeling, I'm not saying we direct our service with emotionalism, but if we don't have a joyful or glad feeling, when we serve him, then there's probably something missing from our understanding of who he is and how fortunate we are, blessed we are to be able to serve him.
Okay. Other comments on the first three verses? Okay. Question number, well, verses 4 and 5, question number 6. Then why should we be thankful? Why should we praise him? As he closes the psalm in 4 and 5, enter into his gates with thanksgiving. Why? What other reasons does it give us for us to be thankful, joyful, and glad? Terry?
Well, the fact that his mercy endures forever. We never reach a point that God is not willing to forgive us. He's faithful to all of his promises that he's made. And those are things that should cause us to be very thankful because we sin. And if his mercy had a limit to us, we would, where would we be?
Okay. So we should come before God with joy and gladness, thanksgiving in his gates with thanksgiving because he's merciful, and the mercy is everlasting. He's always willing to forgive if we're willing to repent. What else does it say? It gives at least a couple other verses in the reasons in the last verse. Why else besides his mercy? Right?
One is that it mentions is that the Lord is good.
Okay. He's good. Psalm 99, he's holy. Psalm 100, he's good. Again, it's who God is that determines why we should want to serve him and how we should serve him. Okay? And there's one other thing in verse 9 that shows why we should be thankful. Excuse me, verse 5. Rick?
His truth endures forever.
His truth endures forever. And we've seen that again several times in the psalm. That you don't have to worry about God's word somehow being disproved by the scientists or by the whoever, atheists or skeptics or whoever, that they can disprove the Bible. No, it's true. It always has been true, and it always will be true. Its truth endures to all generations. And so we have a revelation from God. It's always reliable. We can always depend on it to be right. And all this gives us reason for joy and gladness in our worship to God. Okay? Other comments on Psalm 100? Sharon?
We saw in verse 3 that God is creator and shepherd. Verse 4, entering his gates would imply that either that he's king or that he's judge. Entering his courts definitely would imply that he's judge. And if you get called before the judge on earth, that's usually kind of a nervous, scary thing. Even if you think you're right, you're not certain how that's going to come out. But if you're serving God, you can have great confidence when you come before him. He's going to do it. He's going to be a good judge. He's going to be a just judge. Everything he does is going to be just right. And so we have confidence before him.
Okay. Anything else on Psalm 100? All right, let's move on to Psalm 101 then. And this one is quite a bit different song from some of the others that we've been studying. So let's go ahead and read Psalm 101. Who could read Psalm 101 for us, please? Frank, please.
I will sing of mercy and justice to you, O Lord. I will sing praises. I will behave wisely in a perfect way. O when will you come to me? I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. A perverse heart shall depart from me. I will not know wickedness. Whoever secretly slanders his neighbor, him I will destroy. One who has a haughty look and a proud heart, him I will not endure. My eyes shall be on the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in the perfect way, he shall serve me. He who works deceit shall not dwell within my house. He who tells lies shall not continue in my presence. Early I will destroy all the wicked of the land, that I may cut off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord.
Okay. As I mentioned, this psalm is quite a bit different from the others we've been studying recently. First of all, I want to notice who wrote the psalm. This is a psalm of David, it says in the introduction. Several of the psalms we've been studying recently doesn't mention who wrote it. I think it's important to understand who wrote this one. So this is a psalm of David, and why did you summarize the theme? What was your conclusion about the theme of this psalm? Question number 7. Rick.
To me, it's a personal thing, a personal song of David. Everything says I, or my. So it's personal to him.
All right, it's personal, and yet I think there's a very definite application because of who he is. What was, okay, did I see some other hands? Okay, Terry?
I saw it as David's praise of God, and then his plea, and then God's description of who he will accept.
I'm sorry, what was the last few of the words you said?
God's description of who he will accept.
Okay.
And that he will hear them and who he will not hear.
Okay. Other comments? Right.
Some of the verses or lines seem to be first and second person, and then some of them are speaking as if they're speaking a third person.
Okay.
God.
Yes. Okay. All right, so let's look at it more closely, and let me suggest this for you to think about. When I approached it, it seemed to me that David was speaking, yes, as Rick said, about himself, but himself as king, and what his responsibilities as king was in relationship to other people. That's what I kind of took from it. What he's, as one who had authority, the kind of people he would be willing to have as his close associates, as a king, as a ruler. So let's think of those things and other comments he might have as we go along. First, question number, well, last part of it. Question 7, verses 1 and 2, what's the promise? What promise does he make in verses 1 and 2? Susie.
That he was determined and resolved to live his life and to lead his kingdom based on God's divine principles.
Okay. So he's going to behave properly, he says. He's going to sing in mercy and justice, but verse 2, he's going to behave wisely in a perfect way and walk within my house with a perfect heart. What does it mean to walk within your house with a perfect heart? What were your thoughts about walking within your house with a perfect heart? Karen?
Not only when you're out with other people, but when you're within your home, your mind and your heart are still with the Lord doing what's right.
Okay. Other comments? Sharon?
The ESV says, I will walk with integrity of heart within my house. So he's not, I think perfect is a good word for this, where that's the goal, but the idea isn't that we're somehow going, as humans, necessarily going to attain absolute perfection, but we are trying to do what is right. We're serving God with integrity.
Okay, and the goal certainly is to be perfect. Okay, other comments? Frank?
2 thoughts. One, he is in the male's role in the house, in the family. He's to be an example and lead the family. And the other thought was that sometimes people will present themselves among the brethren in one way, and they're a different person at home.
Okay, those are some of the thoughts I had too, and I appreciate those comments, especially Frank, because first of all, It's easy, let me back off. To me, the hardest place, the hardest relationship to do right consistently, as we ought to, is in our own homes. Now, maybe that's not the case with you, but as Karen was saying, when we're out, and Frank too, when we're out with other people, it's easy to, okay, I can be a nice guy for an hour or so on Sunday morning, but when I go home, I'm going to be myself, and I may not at all be the same kind of person. I may find that I have attitudes towards my family that I wouldn't express at all, things I wouldn't think of doing towards other people, but I do in my home. And so it seems to me that this idea of walking within my house with the perfect heart is an important challenge to all of us, but especially, again, back to Frank's point, to the men, those of us who are leaders. I see this psalm as a psalm of leadership. David was going to walk perfectly in his house, but David's house was the king's house. It wasn't just any house, it was a king's house. He was the leader of the nation. Not only did he have to send a good example for his family, but for the nation. And so, to me, this is a psalm about what we as leaders, whatever our leadership role may be, need to practice proper leadership, beginning in our homes. Other comments on the first two verses? Okay, look now at verse 3, question number 8, verses 3 and 4. So what's he going to remove from his life? If he's going to serve the Lord and behave wisely in a perfect way, verse 2, he's going to walk within his house with a perfect heart. What's going to be removed from his life? What's not going to fit? Bill.
He's going to see nothing wicked before his eyes, and he hates the work of those who fall away.
All right, wickedness, those who fall away.
Shall not cling to me.
Okay. Other comments? Was that what you were going to say, Neil?
Yes.
Okay, other comments? Sharon.
So he's removing temptation. If we want to be blameless before the Lord, if we want to have integrity, then we have to be careful what we read and what movies we watch, what pages we're on. Avoid pornography, avoid things that have bad language, anything that's going to, reasonably, as best we can, we're looking to avoid things that might create bad habits in us or things that might lead us into temptation, because if we know going into it that it's going to be a temptation to us, sooner or later we're going to give into it.
Okay. Other comments? So if we're going to walk wisely, behave wisely in a perfect way, verse 2, before the Lord, walk within our house with a perfect heart, we have to be careful what we allow around us. We are influenced by the things that are around us. We're influenced by the things that we see. We're influenced by the people that are around us. And we have to be careful, not just that we think, well, that's not really right, but don't allow yourself to be encouraged in doing wrong. He says, don't let it cling to you. A perfect heart shall depart from me. I will not know wickedness. I don't want to be around that kind of thing. I realize that we can't avoid all temptation, and I don't believe the psalmist is saying that, but we need to realize that there are things that influence us for harm, and we need to be willing to remove those things. Don't let those things cling. Don't let that be part of us. Okay? Other comments on 3 and 4? And again, let's take it to a leadership role. This is true for all of us, but it's true especially for those of us who are leaders. Those of us are men in our homes or parents with our children. If you have a leadership role on your job, whatever, in the church, whatever role you have where you have an influence on other people, you need to set a good example of eliminating evil from your own life, because God is going to hold you accountable for your conduct as a leader. Okay, other comments, 2, 4? Okay, the next question then, looking at verses 5 and 6. What does he say about what we're going to associate with? Now here's his associations, verse 5 and 6. What does he say about his associations? Bill?
He will not endure anyone who has a haughty look and a proud heart, and someone that slanders his neighbors.
Okay, those who slander their neighbor, have a haughty heart, look, and a proud heart. Okay. Other comments on those the people they will not associate with? Doesn't go. Again, you can't avoid these people completely, but these are not the kind of people that you choose to be your closest companions. These are not the kind of people that you want for your close friends, and you certainly don't want to allow it in your home. Okay? Those who slander, those who are proud. Okay, other comments on 5 and verse 5 at this point. Verse 6, who does he want as his associates? Who will he pursue as a friend? Bill?
If you walk in a perfect way, he'll serve you.
Okay. Those who walk in a perfect way. In other words, other people trying to serve the Lord. Those are the ones, again, that think of a king. A king has those who are his counselors, who are his advisors. He needs advisors who are good people. When you have rulers who are surrounded by evil people, it's going to influence the ruler for bad. Okay, so David is saying that he won't have the bad people around him. Verse 5, he's going to have those who are faithful. They're the ones who are going to dwell with him, who walk in a perfect way. And the same thing then for us, in whatever role we have, we should want to have those who are, as our close friends, those who are going to be a good influence. We can be a good influence on them. Okay, other comments on 5 and 6? Okay. 7 and 8, verse 10. What kind of people is he going to avoid? Now he's going to avoid some other kind of people, 7 and 8. Who is that? Susie.
Those who are deceitful in what they do and liars.
Okay. Again, he who works deceit shall not dwell within my house. He who tells lies shall not continue in my presence. Verily, I will destroy all the wicked of the land. I will cut off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. Now that verse 8 is why I specifically thought this was talking about David as king, because I can't go around destroying wicked people from the land and cutting off evildoers, but David could, because he was a king. So that's what things like that made me think especially of David as a king. But the application to us as whoever we are is, our role is we should not want to associate with and have close companionship with deceitful, lying people, especially not in our home. You don't want that in your home. And David said, he who works deceit shall not dwell in my house. He who tells lies shall not continue in my presence. Why not? What's the problem in having a deceitful, lying people around you, even in your home? What's the problem with that?
They influence the group.
Okay, they influence, don't they? They have an influence on others. What other problems are created if you have a liar or deceitful person in your home?
They can't be trusted.
Yeah, you can't trust them. You don't know when to believe them and when not to believe them. And even though they're telling you the truth, you don't know because they've told you other lies. You don't know whether to trust them or not. You have a home in which you can't trust the people you live with to be honest with you. And so David is saying that that kind of person won't be in my home. And we need to, as leaders in our homes, we need to teach our children, our families, you can't do that. We don't do that. We don't do that kind of way in our house. So we have a responsibility, whatever our leadership role is, to be the kind of leader, it seems to me, that David is talking about here. That we live good lives, we walk uprightly, especially in our homes, and we have close associates that are all upright, and we do not make close friendships with those who are not upright. Again, you can't avoid all evil, and that's not the point. But the point is those who you encourage to be close to you and close to your family need to be people who are serving God. It seems to me that that's a theme of this song. Other comments, discussion on Psalm 101? Rick?
Like you said, we can't avoid having contact with evil. Jesus came to save sinners. But that's what we need to try to strive for too, is to bring people to the church. But at the same time, it goes right back to that verse 3, it shall not cling to me. We don't have to take part in any of it.
And our association with those people is to lead them out of it, to help them to avoid it as well. And if they're willing to listen and be open to the truth, then we're able to help them. But if they're not willing to listen, then they're not the kind of people that are going to be our close associates. Anything else on Psalm 101? Okay.